Dreams are a unique bridge between our conscious and our subconscious. And dreams can be completely different, chaotic, frightening, seemingly meaningless at first glance, or even kind of comical. But in any case, they always carry some interesting hidden messages. And today we're going to talk about how to learn to read and interpret these messages. And for this, we'll use the so-called three-layer method. The first layer is the most superficial one. Here, we look at which events from the day might have triggered this particular dream scenario. For example, let's say you watched a movie about a breakup. This activated the area of your subconscious where the pain from a real-life breakup still lingers, which is why you had this dream. The second layer is external associations. In the second layer, we look at each object and each character in the dream as representing someone from your real life or as some situation from your real life. That is, here your own associations with certain objects from your own life come into play. You might associate strength with your boss. So, for instance, you might dream of a strong, active person, and in this case, your association could be your own boss. We can take this into account during interpretation that, for example, you associate strong qualities with your boss. The third layer. Here, every object in the dream represents some part of your own inner self. So in this case, we might consider the book, for example, as your own wisdom, and the fox, for instance, as your own cunning, and so on and so forth. And when we are analyzing, we take into careful consideration that all three of these distinct layers are considered simultaneously, and all of these profound meanings are truly present within your dream at precisely the same time. Let's say, for example, you had a dream where you're walking down a very dark corridor, and there you encounter a little girl who needs your care. She's frightened. What could this mean? The first layer in this case could be, for example, a movie you just watched where the plot involved something happening to little children. The second layer is the little girl in your dream. She could be, for example, the daughter of an acquaintance of yours who is currently ill. On the third layer, it could be your own internal process where your inner child needs some kind of help, and that's why you see them in a dark hallway scared. In this way, we've looked at this dream through three layers, right? Plus, if you analyze all three of these layers, you'll understand the meaning your subconscious is trying to show you in a much more multifaceted way. And you'll realize that in this case, for example, your friend's daughter is, in a sense, even associated with your own inner child. Maybe she has some similar traits, whether external or internal, and that will also play a role in the interpretation. Let's look at another dream. Imagine that in your dream, you find yourself in a house with absolutely no windows. And you discover a certain chest there, and inside this chest is a medal for some kind of athletic achievement. How can this be interpreted in such a case? The first layer, the surface layer, might be connected to the fact that on the day you had this dream, or maybe the day before, you visited someone in a new place, and that house was rather dimly lit. So your subconscious held on to that image and later used it in this dream scenario. Now, let's look at the second layer. Most likely, this house, this space, might be associated with someone you know who leads a rather closed-off lifestyle and doesn't really interact much with others. And that's exactly why you dreamed of a house without windows. At the same time, for example, the medal you found in the chest can also, in the second layer, be associated with someone you know who has achieved some kind of success, say, in sports. And in some way, this stirs something in you. That is, you probably have some ambitions in this regard as well, perhaps not entirely conscious. And that's why you dream that there's this medal in the chest. Now, the third layer. In the third layer, we consider that this windowless house is actually your inner space, and for some reason at this moment, you have few contacts and have somewhat isolated yourself from the outside world. In this sense, the chest in this layer represents a kind of hidden zone within you, something you are hiding from yourself. The metal found in this chest serves as a hint about what talent you have been concealing from yourself and what you need to uncover within yourself. And in this case, the subconscious is hinting at some achievements in sports. Maybe you have some kind of predisposition for this. Maybe you even have athletic ambitions, but for some reason, you've locked all of that away inside yourself, in a chest. That's it. This analysis helps you find a way out, a part of your personality that is limited, closed off, quite self-contained, and helps you develop yourself, to realize perhaps some of your long-held ambitions, old dreams. Let's look at the next dream, a room with mirrors. For example, you find yourself in a large room whose walls are completely covered with mirrors. There's nothing and no one in the room except you and the mirrors. You start walking around the room. You see a reflection in the mirrors, but each reflection looks a little different. In one, for example, you see yourself young, in another old, in a third sad, in a fourth joyful, happy. And you try to examine each of these reflections. But the closer you get, the more distorted the reflection becomes. And in one of the mirrors, instead of yourself, you see a stranger and you feel a kind of aversion toward him. He looks at you with a smirk. You get scared. Maybe you even try to break that mirror, and eventually you see a door and leave the room. Let's imagine a dream like that. So, how do we analyze this on the first level? Maybe this dream was triggered by some recent events in your life. For example, maybe you looked in the mirror and suddenly noticed that you've changed a lot lately, and that got recorded in your subconscious. Now, for the second level, a room full of mirrors might represent your interactions with different people in various situations where you feel differently about yourself each time. When talking to some people, you feel happy. With others, you feel sad. And each of these states can also remind you of different situations or different people from your life. A stranger in the mirror might remind you of someone in your environment who makes you feel uncomfortable, anxious, or scared, someone you wouldn't want to associate yourself with. Let's move on to the third layer, to the internal processes. In this case, the room with mirrors is your subconscious, where different aspects of your personality reside. These different aspects of your personality can also belong to different periods of your life. These are like subpersonalities. They might compete for your attention, for your recognition. The stranger in the mirror is your shadow. It's what you don't accept in yourself. And you can also analyze who this stranger was associated with for you in the second layer and understand what traits they have that you can't acknowledge in yourself. And finally, the door is also an exit from this dream space. With the help of this dream, we can understand what need your subconscious has. The need to accept yourself as different, to reflect on your various states, and to accept, including those states of yours that you feel repulsed by. Shadow. Think about your shadow, some shadow sides of your personality. Let's look at another dream. Imagine you dream that you're at some very large event, surrounded by a huge number of people. You see a man who is very poorly dressed, maybe even dressed sloppily. He's blowing his nose loudly, saying all sorts of awkward things. Everyone is looking at him, laughing, and you don't know what to do. You feel sorry for him. You kind of want to help him, but at the same time, you feel at least a little embarrassed by it, and maybe you even laugh along with the people around you. And you wake up with this feeling of anxiety, confusion, not knowing what to do. So let's break it down into 3 layers. The first layer. In this case, maybe you saw, either in a movie or in real life, someone who was in an awkward situation. Now, for the second layer. This person who doesn't behave very confidently and ends up being laughed at by others, maybe that reminds you of someone you know, someone who often finds themselves in that kind of situation. This event, in principle, could be your own environment, some significant occasions where people might judge each other. And all of that is the second layer. But in the third layer, one part of you probably judges yourself from the outside, tries to see yourself through other people's eyes, and at the same time criticizes yourself, not really accepting yourself. At the same time, you have a part that doesn't really know how to behave, that feels shy. Maybe this part isn't very adapted to certain rules of etiquette, or it can get so lost among people that it behaves in a completely ridiculous way. And at the same time, maybe in real life you really are sometimes very sloppy, and you know this about yourself too. And so there is a conflict between these parts of you. One part looks with great judgment at the second part, which can become a laughingstock for you. And in this dream, there is also a third part of you, a kind of mediator between these conflicting sides. And it is precisely from the perspective of this mediator that you see the dream. And this mediator seems to be in the middle, taking a neutral position, right? He seems to be with those who are laughing at TH, at this person, but at the same time he feels sympathy. It's as if he's with this man who is being laughed at. This suggests that your subconscious is currently trying to resolve the conflict and somehow unite these two sides. How can they be united? That is, the evaluator, the inner critic, should become a bit more tolerant, more accepting, and kinder toward that part which may be trying to be less sloppy and which can try a bit harder to control its actions, at least when in the presence of others at some important, let's say, events. So here, you can look for that point of compromise where both sides can reconcile, and that will then be valuable information that the dream gives us. And this will be something that we can integrate into our lives and use going forward. With these examples, I've shown you how you can use the 3-layer technique. I hope it will be useful to you. And be sure to keep writing down your dreams and keep watching the videos. I believe you will learn a lot, and your dreams will become very valuable messages from your subconscious, helping you make your life even better and more interesting.